Good morning on this 22nd day of August 2013. Many thanks for staying with us on KTN Sunrise Live on this Thursday morning. And we would now like to talk about a sensitive subject, but one that will form part of our conversations and indeed should form part of our conversations from now going forward. When we move away from matters of politics, there's matters that affect us from day to day. If close to 500,000 women in this country who are our mothers, our sisters, our daughters, our nieces, our aunts, are procuring abortions and in an unsafe manner, this is something that should concern us. We've been talking about this for ages and ages and still not finding any solutions. Today, that's what we aim to do. And so we're asking you to participate in this conversation with us, not necessarily to demonize the women, demonize the young girls, or demonize the government or the backstreet quack doctors, but to try and find a solution out of this. Close to 500,000 women in this country, that is not a small number. Some of them, as Angel Katusia told you in the story we aired just a short while ago, as young as 10 years old in the country. So something that is definitely serious and worth discussing. We're discussing that report on abortions that was released yesterday, and we invite you to seek solutions with us over the next 45 minutes or so as we discuss this issue right here. You can tweet me at Yvonne Okwara at KTN Kenya. You can also send us an SMS 8040. What is the solution towards ending these rising cases of abortion in the country? I'm joined by Dr. Joachim Osur, who's a reproductive health specialist. Many thanks for being with us this morning and discussing this issue. Let's get into it first. Before we even start discussing the numbers and everything, what is your definition of an abortion? You know, sometimes we talk about these things. I think it would be important to have a clear understanding. What's your definition of an abortion?
So abortion conventionally and medically is defined as the termination of a pregnancy before it is viable to exist outside of the body. That can be spontaneous, meaning that it came out by itself, or it can be induced. So someone interfered or made it to come out before viability, meaning once it comes out, it cannot survive.
Okay, no chances of survival of that. So, you know, let's talk about that then, now that we have a very clear understanding of what abortion is, and we now know it can happen spontaneously, where, you know, it's not induced, it's not the mother's fault. I mean, these things happen to ladies and women all the time. Let's talk about it now, and according to what the law of Kenya states, we know that the Constitution now, you know, has that, you know, rider that says we will allow abortions in certain instances. Which ones are those that are permitted? Yeah,
so this was discussed quite extensively during the Constitution-making process, and I think we voted for it. Article 26, Part 4 of the Constitution allows abortion in cases of emergency, when the life of the woman is in danger, when the health of the woman is in danger, or if allowed by any other law. Now, I think it is important to break up this. What does it actually mean? Health, by WHO definition, means a state of well-being, social well-being, physical well-being, emotional well-being, psychological well-being. And according to the Constitution, when a woman has unwanted pregnancy, they should go to a trained health professional. And counseling should happen so that the trained health professional should be able to determine if this pregnancy affects health, life, or whether there is an emergency for it, where health in this case means psychological well-being, social well-being, emotional well-being, physical well-being. So it's really upon the woman and the health worker to talk, and for the health worker to determine whether this woman's life or health is in danger, and then the abortion becomes legal. All
right. As an OBGYN, let's talk about some of those particular instances where we have seen doctors saying this is an emergency. What's usually happening to the mother's health at that time? You know, what is it like? What is she going through that then necessitates that decision?
So emergency for us means a medical condition that needs urgent attention. In some medical conditions, that urgent attention might mean terminating the pregnancy. There are women who get high blood pressure when they're pregnant, and they actually start convulsing, and that convulsion will not stop until the pregnancy is terminated. So there are such instances, or someone just starts to bleed, and the bleeding is severe, and the only way to stop it is to terminate the pregnancy.
Okay.
So there are such emergencies where we don't even have to bargain. The pregnancy has to come out for the woman to live.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. At least understanding some of those. Then let's talk about this report. Then, when we talk about lots of women who now go into an abortion. And we do know, of course, by this time, it is not necessarily a case of emergency, else they'd be in hospital. If, you know, an expectant mother starts to bleed, the first place she'll go to is the hospital, and then it'll be determined it's an emergency. But with the cases that we're seeing now, it is by choice. It is either unwanted, unplanned, or mistimed. Those are some of the cliche terms that we hear being used. What are your thoughts on the numbers? Could they be higher? Let's understand how they arrived at 466,000 plus, you know, because people don't walk in and say, I want to have an abortion in any hospital, public or private.
So it's important to understand the background to this, because abortion is very highly stigmatized and a private matter. When a woman has unwanted pregnancy and they really want to abort it, they don't think of the hospital first.
Yes.
They talk to their friends, they talk to their relatives, and most of the time they are directed to a private, unsafe provider of abortion. Sometimes they even buy medicine or take things that they think will terminate the pregnancy, and they do it on themselves. We know a number of women take Omo, they take Jik, they take concentrated tea. We have had cases of people taking quinine, high doses of quinine or Panadol, and then they come to hospital very sick. Some even use, you know, sticks, spoons, forks to poke themselves, and then when they start bleeding, they come to hospital. So this study was just counting those women. The women who had tried to do something on themselves, or had gone to someone who did not know what to do, and then they interfered with the pregnancy, and then the woman comes to hospital. So this study went to hospitals around the country, and they were counting those numbers for 12 months.
Could it then be higher? Because sometimes for some women, it's, shall we say, successful, and I hate to use that word in regard to this one, but you know, there's not everyone who goes to a hospital, either public or private, from these complications arising. Some others do not necessarily have complications themselves, and you know, they just sort of manage to get this done and they move on with life. So do you think this number could be much higher than what we're hearing?
Well, it is, according to the study method which was used, it is the most accurate that could be arrived at. But we know that there could be more uncounted women. If someone had a safe abortion, for example, they are not included in this report. If they died in the village without anybody knowing, you may not have counted it. So there is a possibility that these numbers could be higher than what we are seeing. But using an internationally agreed methodology, this is the most accurate that could be arrived at. The numbers and the sort of people involved, we have this assumption in Kenya that abortions are done by teenage girls who fall pregnant, and you're confused because your life is at an end. But we're now seeing there's a high number of married women, those who are divorced, or those who are living in some sort of situation that mimics marriage, if you like. It may not be a formal marriage, but they've been living together, they're in a steady relationship, and those are some of the figures that you can see on your screen now. Let's talk about these numbers. And, you know, married women procuring abortions. Everyone thinks in a marriage that, you know, all is well and good. You know, you have the children, and there wouldn't be that stigma attached to having a child when you're married, right, doctor? Yeah. In fact, what we have been taught in our communities is that only bad women abort. When we are growing up, we are told that it's the prostitutes who abort. That it is, you know, the wayward women who abort. And they are painted, so you have a picture of a very bad woman when you think of abortion. Now, what we know from experience as health workers, or the studies done internationally, is that any woman can abort. Unwanted pregnancies happen to any woman, whether married or not. And so it is not surprising that married women are aborting. For us, it's something we see every day. You will also remember that the HIV reports show that HIV happens in marriage. So really, for me, it is a normal finding that the more aborting women are married.
Yes.
63%.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're about 64.4%, I think.
So all it means is that, sex was never meant. I know everybody would like to say that sex is just for procreation, but in real life, that is not what sex is for.
Yeah, not for human beings at least. Yes.
They do sex for pleasure. And when they do sex for pleasure, sometimes pregnancy happens when it is not needed at that particular time. And so whether in marriage or outside marriage, they can decide to abort.
But then the question comes in of contraceptives, and let's talk about that, because that could help prevent some of the cases we are seeing, and especially even amongst married couples, planning their families, deciding when they will have children, at what intervals they will have children. Does this indicate, I wouldn't want to call it a total failure, but that the whole thing about planning of families is not something that's been taken into account? And why is that? Because it's supposedly free in all government institutions.
There are actually a number of problems. We can say contraceptive services are free, but if you go into a health facility, do you actually get the method that you want? As a country, we've not been able to put enough money into healthcare. If you remember, this year we are putting 6%. The ideal is 15%. In fact, as time goes, we seem to be reducing that percentage. We are unable to purchase contraceptive commodities for every woman in this country. We depend on donors, and donors will give you what they have, not what the women want.
That's right.
So someone goes to a health facility, they want coil, but we only have condoms, or they want pills. We can only give the injection. So they will go away without a method. I think the first thing we need to do is just to put money in healthcare that will allow us to purchase the commodities that we need for healthcare, including reproductive health. Secondly, a few years ago, there was a lot of mobilization for family planning, for use of contraception. There were billboards all over the streets. There were radio programs. There were community distributors of contraceptive methods. Now that has died off over the years. We no longer see a lot of that. And so a lot of women don't even know about contraceptives. There are a lot of myths in communities about contraceptives. The government had a system where community health workers were given contraceptives, and they would go from house to house in the villages, and they would give them out. They would teach those women. That program died off. So there has been a problem over the last 10, 20 years on the contraceptive service that we need to think about again. If you look at the contraceptive prevalence rate over the last 15, 20 years, it has kind of remained stagnant. Only 39% of women who need contraceptives are able to use them. 39%
of women?
So where are the others? What are they doing? You will remember in this study again that 70% of those women aborting unsafely were not on any contraceptive.
Right, at all.
At all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which then shows you that the message has not gone through.
Yeah, the contraceptive program in Kenya is not doing well, basically. And I think it's something we need to think about. Also, perhaps in the way in which it is done, because perhaps once people get into marriage, and let's not be oblivious, we live in Nairobi, or we live in Eldoret, Kisumu, Mombasa, the big towns and the metropolises around the country. But, for the average person that does not live near a big town, even persons who are married do not talk about family planning. I mean, once you're married, you're married. So, there's no need to ever use condoms or pills, or, we're married now. I mean, I think perhaps the issue of contraceptives is for people who are not yet married or in a steady relationship, and you say, well, we do not want to have what we call unwanted pregnancies. Perhaps amongst married couples, that message also, perhaps, from a cultural point of view, let's talk about some of those things. You've talked about myths and perhaps cultures and the ways in which we approach this. Do you think we've tackled it in the right way? There is still a very big problem with culture as well, which stops women from using contraceptives. We know women who have been, beaten by their husbands because they were found taking a contraceptive. Because the man wants to know whom are you sleeping with? Why are you taking?
Other than me, yes.
Other than me.
Right, yeah.
And a lot of women have to hide and go into a health facility. The highest used method of family planning today in Kenya is the injectable method. The injectable method is you can hide it. And so when you hide it, nobody will know that you are using it. And so a lot of women are hiding and using those contraceptives that the husband will not be able to detect. So I think it's a problem even at community level that we need to deal with.
Okay. All right. I just want to go into some of the feedback that you are giving us on the show today regarding this issue. Remember, we're trying to seek solutions about the high cases of abortion that we have. Anthony Bishop says, too bad that abortion is highest amongst married women and not college girls, as many of us believe. Samaram, okay, Soita, let me get your second name. You say, it's one of those problems that needs multi-sectoral approaches that involve men, women, and society in general. Let's focus on why we have these increasing numbers. We have another tweet here. You say, we are working with known figures. I'm scared to think about those that go unnoticed. That's on Twitter. Let me read you some of the SMSs that you're sending in. Anne in Mathare, thank you for texting. You say there's need for awareness, especially in poor areas like the slums. This month alone, more than 8 girls between 14 to 16 years have gotten pregnant. And another text here saying, health education by parents, churches about the dangers of early sex and abortion and HIV should also be incorporated and can play a big part. Contraception also vital. Philip watching us from Machakos, keep on sending in your solutions, and we like that, and we will get into some of those, and let's perhaps start this conversation that you will then carry on even after this show. We're talking about abortion and those rising cases. Close to 500,000 women have procured an abortion in the last year alone, and these are the women who are going to hospitals now with several complications, so you can imagine the ones that actually don't get to hospital. We are with Dr. Joachim Osur, who's just shedding more light on this. Let's get away from the married women for a moment and talk about early teenage pregnancies, which is also something that is on the rise and something that is being focused on, and a group of people that we surely should not forget when we have this discussion, and sex education. What do you think about that?
So recently, if you've been following the news, in Mount Elgon, 17 girls were found pregnant in one school.
Right.
A lot of young girls are getting pregnant, and there is a problem with the education system, basically. I have talked to a number of teachers. None of them is trained to be able to empower young people to prevent unwanted pregnancy, to make decisions about their sexuality. Teachers are trained to teach you biology. They are trained to teach you English. They are not trained to empower you to have skills in life that can help you manage your reproduction. And that is a very big gap. And many times we have said we need sexuality education in schools, but we know there has been a backlash. People think if you empower young people with knowledge and skills, then you're making them to have sex. I don't think that is the case. We have seen studies from countries where this has been done. When people know what they should do, they either avoid it or make an informed choice to do it.
Yes.
Now, in our situation, because sex is so harsh, we never talk about it, we don't have skills about it. People are trying to experiment, they're learning from their friends, they're doing it secretly, and then the consequences come, and they just get surprised that you can actually get pregnant by having sex once. We have myths among young people like, if you have sex standing, you will not conceive. And things like that. And those
still exist.
They do exist because nobody is talking to young people about sexuality. And schools are not seeing themselves as meant to empower young people with skills to prevent unwanted and safe sex and unwanted pregnancy.
Beyond the academics. So our education system needs to be much more wholesome. It's great that we get good grades,
because young people spend almost 3/4 of their time in schools. When they come home, they come to eat and sleep. And then they go back to school. So if the school is not helping them, then there is a problem. Of course, we also need to talk about what's happening in families. If people found their child with a condom, I'm sure they will beat them up. Nobody is ready to talk to their child about safe sex. So people are hoping their children are not having sex. So even at family level, I think there is need to open up. We had traditional systems for empowering people with sexuality knowledge, and those traditional systems no longer exist. Families now need to see other ways of making sure that young people know about sexuality.
Because, and when you talk about the traditional systems, I think we sit here and assume that sex education or having that discussion with our children is something that emanates from the West. But we did have our own methods of doing that during rites of passage, initiation, circumcision, and the like. But, you know, parents also do bear some responsibility.
Definitely. Now, I know there are churches which try to teach young people about sex, but we have not really structured it. Sometimes they're not telling young people what they want to hear, and so you find young people are going into internet, they're watching TV, and they're getting their own knowledge and teaching each other.
Yes.
So there is just need to structure that training, whether it is at church level, at family level, at school level, so that the young person knows exactly what the truth is. Let's not shy away by letting them know.
Yeah, indeed. And, you know, one of those tough conversations that perhaps should be had in every home. Let's get back to the abortion itself, and you being a specialist in the area of reproductive health. And like we said, these statistics are from women who've gone to hospital and it went wrong because, you know, an abortion went wrong. Let's talk about some of those cases that you see and the effects of a botched abortion.
So it is a range of things that happen. A lot of women come actually being wheeled, having bled massively, so they are lacking blood and they are fainting. They come to hospital and they have to be transfused and resuscitated before they can leave. We lose some along that line when the bleeding has been too much and the interventions are not timely, because they delayed at home. Some come with very severe infections of the reproductive system, and that infection gets into the blood and it affects all other organs, and we have cases of organ failure. The kidney is failing, the liver is failing, because the infection is overwhelming to the body. Some will come with injuries, physical injuries to the genital system. They have poked and ruptured their uterus or torn their bladder, urine is coming through the vagina and things like that. And it forces us to take them to theater and do the repairs. There are young women who have had to have their uteruses removed because they were trying an abortion. So there are those acute ones, but there are also the long-term effects. Someone got a bad infection when they were trying to abort unsafely. Many years later in life, that infection destroyed the reproductive system. They cannot conceive. Someone went through a very traumatic experience trying to terminate that pregnancy. It leaves a psychological scar. So there is no limit to what can happen. When they take things like overdose of quinine or paracetamol, or they drink jik, we have had women vomiting blood because the whole system is corroded, or they
the alimentary canal is just...
So anything is possible with botched abortions.
And those are, I think that is the greatest thing. And let's talk about then that burden on, the healthcare system, because this is then, another procedure. Of course, looking after a woman like that costs money per patient.
It costs the government a lot of money. Right now, we don't have updated statistics. But if you take, for example, a woman who has to be admitted, has to undergo blood transfusion, has to be given antibiotics for some time in the ward.
Has to stay in hospital.
Has to stay, has to go to theater sometimes for an operation to correct the damage. It's a lot of money. We are looking forward to some more studies just to be able to quantify on average how much money we are using as a country to treat those abortions.
Okay, and another possible solution, I guess, and we were talking about this just before we came on air in regards to this. We've talked about contraceptives, we've talked about having those open discussions and reviving our traditional systems that we had, where unlike what most people will not believe, we did talk about sex, you know, in the era of our forefathers and of our ancestors. But also the process of adoption in this country, which we know is it's a long process, it's tedious, and it puts many people off. How is this now a solution to this issue of abortions, unsafe ones?
Yeah, so the Ministry of Health has come up with guidelines after the new constitution was promulgated. The ministry developed guidelines because health workers were a bit confused. There were a lot of discussions during the constitution making process. So people started wondering, so is abortion legal? Is it illegal? What are we supposed to do as health workers when a woman walks in? Because we know it is in the Bill of Rights, so you have to really make sure you're not, you know, disrespecting people's rights.
Yes.
So the ministry came up with a guide on how we should handle those cases. And when someone comes in with unwanted pregnancy, we are supposed to counsel them. We are supposed to counsel them. Counseling means, you know, exploring options. And the options are many. One, you have a chance to carry these pregnancies. There's social support for you. You can be helped. And we have organizations that are ready to support such a woman to have the pregnancy to term.
Okay.
Now, some may want to carry the pregnancy, but they just don't want to keep the baby. Okay. So the health workers are supposed to link up with the adoption system so that when the baby is born, the baby is given out to a children's home and can be adopted. Okay. And then those who want the abortion and the doctor or the nurse or the clinical officers assess and they find it to be legal are supposed to then have a legal abortion. They're not supposed to go to the back street. Okay. So in terms of adoption services, therefore, it is very important, and the health workers are being trained on how the process works so that they know what to do. They know who to call the children's officer in the district. Right. They know which children's homes exist, and they can easily link up these women with that service.
All right, so that process of counseling is also very important to explore those options. So it's unwanted, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it must be terminated. There are options after. And also the adoption process itself is being made easier. Definitely. Because you know what happens is if women are giving birth and they're filling up in the children's homes and nobody's taking them up because the process is just so tedious. But I like the fact that health officials now know what to do when a woman comes in and says, I'm pregnant, but I'm not sure that this is what I want, so that it doesn't always end in terminating the pregnancy. There are options available.
There are options. It can still be terminated if it is legal and justifiable. It can be given out for adoption. It can be carried to term, and social support around the woman can be activated to enable that support. I think the message that we really need to give to women is that our hospitals are now ready to talk to them. You know, previously what used to happen, you walk into a health facility and you say, I have a pregnancy which I don't want. And the doctor tells you, get out of my office. And
that's the thing, the stigma also surrounding that.
Yes, so women just didn't want to come to hospital. They chose to go to a quack, get some damages, then they come to hospital so that they can be received.
And then they'll be treated.
Now that has changed. And health workers now have an obligation to welcome such a woman, talk to them, counsel them, so that they really can take a choice that they are, you know, informed of. Whether it is the abortion, if it is legal, whether it is the adoption, whether it is carrying the pregnancy to term.
Okay. Also, when we talk about the ladies who come in and they've got some complications, you know, arising from a botched abortion, do we still see the stigma? And perhaps many women either fear going to the hospital or are turned away, that, you know, as happens, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, in other sectors, like for those who have attempted suicide, and you go in and we hear cases in government and private institutions sometimes that people always say, but you wanted to die, so we will just, you know, let you go ahead and finish the process even though you're doing it here in hospital. Do we have some of those cases also amongst health practitioners themselves? So when a lady comes in, yes, she may have committed a crime, yes, but she needs health services, and perhaps the health practitioners are thinking, oh, you're those types and this, what you've done is a crime, and perhaps they do not offer the support. Do we think that health practitioners also need to open up more?
Now, if there is a health worker who behaves in that way, then that is really unethical. It's not what we are taught to do. The health worker is not a judge. Okay. The health worker is not a priest to label people sinful.
Right.
The health worker's role is to help the person get health. And it is the right of the person to be given health. The Constitution now actually says every person has a right to high quality health care, Article 43 of the Bill of Rights. And if you go into a health facility and you are talked to badly or you are turned away, your rights are being abused, and people need to agitate against that.
Okay.
And the health worker can actually be punished. So if anybody hates abortion, they should be able to talk nicely to the woman and refer to someone else who can provide that
if they
service.
feel they cannot, absolutely deal with that case.
Yeah.
But ideally, they should provide health to all, regardless of the circumstances under how, that happened.
I mean, if a robber is shot in the streets and they are brought to me, I should be able to treat them.
Okay.
It's my role to make them live.
Okay.
So the judge can deal with the other things.
Okay.
Yeah, and we hope that is what happens with abortion, with family planning. We know there are health workers who would not even want to give contraceptives because of their religious or whatever.
Beliefs, yes.
Now, healthcare demands that we do what we are supposed to do and put our religion aside.
Okay, and speaking of religion as well, that is something, especially when we have the religious leaders and that debate over the right to life versus pro-choice for the women, that's still something we're struggling with as a country, right?
Yeah, I believe the religious institutions have a big role to play in reducing the number of abortions and unsafe abortions at that. And the guidelines that the Ministry of Health has issued kind of advise that every sector needs to play their role. The church can help in promoting abstinence. We are talking about young people.
Okay.
The church can help in promoting faithfulness to one partner. All those contribute to reducing the numbers of unwanted pregnancy. I think the war that we saw during the constitution making process should have taught us enough that it doesn't stop women from conceiving and from aborting.
Yes.
We can do better by just playing our roles right. The women who are aborting are not from hell. They're just the women who come to church.
Very true.
They're just the Muslim women too.
Very true.
So we need to work within the church and the Islamic and other institutions that are religious to help these women to know how to manage their sexuality. And so all of us should play a more positive role than condemning. By the way, there are women who will come to abort because they want to hide that pregnancy from their church or from their Islamic faith.
Okay.
Because it is illegal.
Right.
We will be excommunicated, so I would rather abort. So I don't think that is the intention of the church, to make people abort. The intention is to help people manage their sexuality and live a life that will be acceptable to their faiths.
And not demonize them. When they come to church, they're pregnant, and obviously in this case it would be that they're not married, and that perhaps we also do need to take a different stand as society as well. We still have that when we look at a woman who's not married and who's expecting a baby. Let's be honest, we still do say, she's not married, how could she? Much as we try to tell ourselves that we are modern, I doubt that that's what we are. And, we see it all the time with relatives, with friends, in society, in the places we work, wherever we are. The first question you always ask when a woman is expecting is she married? Oh, shame on her for not being married and having a child. That means she has been doing 1, 2, 3. So even as society, we stand accused.
Yeah, I think we need to first appreciate single parents for really working hard to raise their children. People get pregnant under various circumstances. Sometimes it's consensual, sometimes it's not even consensual. People are raped, people are forced into sex.
Right.
You get someone you thought would marry you, you have sex. The moment they discover you're pregnant, they run away from you. As a woman, what are you supposed to do? So I think we need to not be judgmental. And if you have a chance to listen and just understand what these people go through. I think life is so complex when you talk about sexuality. It's never that straight. that you will have a church wedding, then you will have sex, then you will
have
conceive.
A baby, yes.
There are many. It's not a straight path.
That's right. It's not black and white.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned, a case of rape. And now, we know legally when you go into counseling and you say this is an unwanted pregnancy, I think that for me qualifies more than probably any other instance of an unwanted pregnancy, one that arises from a case of rape.
Yeah. In fact, there are a lot of sexual offenses that lead to unwanted pregnancy. When we are talking of pregnancies of young people starting from the age of 10, between 10 and 18 years, legally it is defined as defilement. It's not really legal sex. It is defilement. So someone has defiled a child. And so that is, for me, an illegal pregnancy. Yeah, the girl has a choice to carry that pregnancy to term. But if that girl wanted an abortion, I think it will be double tragedy to let that woman or that girl go and have it unsafely and suffer the consequences. Because one, they have been defiled, and then secondly, you are now subjecting them to a life-threatening situation in the back street. So those are girls who need help. But also, even in marriage, we know marriages are having problems. Some people are almost moving out of a marriage and then they get pregnant. There are those things. And they conceive when things are like that, and so on. So some of those marriages, there is a lot of rape happening. I know in our Sexual Offences Act, we didn't really say that rape can happen in marriage, but we know it does happen.
Yes. And then that's a controversial one.
It's a controversial one, And then there are all these rapes and incest and a lot of these things and sex for favors. You have to have sex with someone before they promote you in a place of work.
Even for young girls, there's a study that's come out, and there's some young girls, and I know of one lady, Anne McCreath. She's a designer, and she's working with these young ladies who are having sex for sanitary towels. I mean, it's gotten to that point. When we think about it from what we would like to think of the sophisticated cases, where it's for a promotion, for some girls, it's as basic as having sanitary towels at the end of the month, and so they'll sleep with boys, either their own age or older, to just get money to buy sanitary towels.
Yes, we've had those stories. So just sex to be able to buy chips.
Yes.
Because you've never eaten chips.
Yes.
You don't have the money. Your parents are poor. Everybody's talking about it. So
and you
what do you
do?
do? And we have all these cross-generational relationships where 50, 60, 70-year-old is sleeping with a 20-year-old. And it is really like being used as a sex slave because you cannot negotiate for that sex. You cannot demand for your rights in a relationship. But they are happening because the woman is poor or the girl is poor and they are looking for survival. So they are looking for these old people who are readily giving money, buying cars, and even renting apartments for them. And things just happen. So when they get pregnant, sometimes they have to make a choice.
I mean, it really is about food. Here's a controversial question, and she obviously didn't leave her name, but these are the sort of instances we are discussing, and we've just gotten this on our SMS line. And thank you, whoever you are, for texting. And she says, I'm 2 weeks pregnant and I would really want to abort. I have been taking conch tea and it's not working. What should I do? And these are questions, much as I know everybody will say, but we cannot have such a question. But this is what Kenyan women are going through every day, and these are some of the questions that they ask, and she's asking us what to do, but chances are she'll go, like you say, ask friends and relatives. What would you say to a lady such as this one?
So we get a lot of these questions, anonymous sometimes. The hospitals are supposed now to open their doors. We have a law, we have guidelines. Health workers are supposed to receive these women. So I would advise that lady to go to a health facility. They will get counseling. And the counseling will give them the options that they have. And then they can make an informed choice. The circumstances of the pregnancy will be discussed, and the health worker then can make a decision if she still wants an abortion, whether that is really legal. And I would really request that she doesn't go to a quack, an unregistered clinic or some some of those people. Yeah.
The fact that we know that in certain instances the law does allow abortion in the country, you know, if the mother's life is in danger, if it is an emergency, there are other options to abortion, and sometimes perhaps we don't get to hear that, Dr. And these are some of the things that you're saying. If this lady goes to hospital, that will be discussed. Why does it seem like sometimes abortion is the only way out of a situation of an unwanted, untimed, you know, all these terms that we use to describe that pregnancy? But there are other options, you know, other than abortion, right?
Yeah,
is that a message we should also be preaching, that it's fine you get pregnant, but you don't have to terminate?
There are options. There are options, and there are social support systems in place to help a woman who wants to carry unwanted pregnancy, either to care for it or to give it out for adoption. That option is there, and health workers will talk to the woman about it. Now, we get women who come, we go through all those options, and then they say, you know what, I have decided I am aborting. They will even tell you, I know some people have died from abortion. If it is choosing between death and this pregnancy, I'm ready to die.
Wow.
Now, those are the women who will say, okay, let's check the legality of this, and if it is legal, please don't go to a quack. The health system should be able to provide it safely.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, when a woman decides they don't want to carry pregnancy, what I have seen from my experience, it's very difficult to stop them. They will want to abort it.
Okay. Okay. Or at least give them the option that they do not necessarily have to keep the baby. There are those options.
There are those options, and we do give them. And we encourage every health worker to really give all the options. Health workers are not supposed to have an interest in the decisions that our patients make.
Right.
So we should be very neutral in giving those options and looking at the pros and the cons, so that the woman can make an informed choice that is good for her situation.
Okay, all right. And this is what we're talking about, and we will get into the politics of the numbers and how the research was done, and that is a discussion we'll be having. But I think the bigger discussion for me is how do we stop this? Unsafe abortions. Many women are dying. Others have complications that they live with for life. And I think the fact that whether it's 466,000 or one woman that procures an unsafe abortion, that is a discussion we should be having. And sometimes you think there's the danger that we just get into the numbers. Who did the research? How was it done? Are they 466, or are they 400, or are they 300, or are they 1 million, or are they... Do you think sometimes we just get consumed in those numbers? What should be the real discussion here, Dr.
In fact, the one thing that we are not discussing, that this study has not brought out strongly, is that some women die.
Yeah.
In the course of that study, they were able to identify deaths from unsafe abortion. A lot of those deaths happen in the community. Some happen as people come to hospital because the complications cannot be treated. We are thinking, because some of them are not reported, the chiefs, when someone dies in a village because of abortion, and it is the chief to fill the death certificate and all that, they will not know what it was. People will say, oh, you know, they bled. We don't know what happened.
That's right.
So we really don't know how many people die in the villages because of abortion. We know they are there. But the ones who die in the hospitals are many. If you take deaths related to pregnancy, unsafe abortion contributes almost 30% of those deaths. I think it is not right for any woman to die from causes that we can prevent.
Right.
We can prevent unsafe abortion. We know how to do it. We should not allow any woman to die. Okay.
For you, as we close, what should be the overarching take-home message in this discussion? Numbers, yes, married women. And I know, because I have specifically avoided talking about this because they've also detailed it according to regions. And as Kenyans, you know, we'll start to ask, why Central, why Nairobi, why Rift Valley, why this area? Do we have higher numbers? And we'll get into those discussions. But for you, what should we remember? What should we be focusing on when we take a look at this report?
For me, when one unsafe abortion happens, when one woman dies from unsafe abortion, it is a clear signal of system failure. Social system failure, religious system failure, medical system failure. I think we all have a role to play. The school system, the family, we have a role to play to prevent unwanted pregnancy. Condemning, I think, has contributed more to those deaths rather than preventing them.
Right.
We need to think of how to contribute more positively than to stigmatize, condemn, and discriminate such women. The moment people realize that we care, that the church cares, that the health people care, that their families care, they will stop and think before they go to a quack. And I think that's what we need.
Okay, indeed, and that's a great way to talk about it. System failure in all aspects, from the social to the religious to the education to the health sector. It's something that we need to be talking about, and less of the demonizing. Thank you very much. Dr. Joachim Osur, reproductive health specialist, who's been talking to us about that report that's just been released on the rising cases of abortion in the country. Let me just read some of your feedback. Charles, you say, abortions are a national disaster. Government must give firm direction moving forward. Wanza, you say, do we legalize cocaine or rape because the youth are dying from the vice? Educate people on responsible sex and making adoption easier. And that is the discussion. George Kisundi says, if every woman with an unwanted pregnancy met the likes of Dr. Joachim, then abortions would be minimal. And this is precisely the way we need to be having this discussion. We're not heated. We're not getting all emotional about it. We're just cool, calm, and collected. And this is how you should be having these discussions at home. Not the numbers, not the regions. For heaven's sake, if I see one of those tweets or statements that says, why the people of Rift Valley, why the people of Nyanza, why the people of the coast, you're missing the entire point altogether. That this is a discussion we must have solution-oriented as well. And so, just continue to have this conversation. It doesn't have to end here. That's what a report like this is supposed to be about. And Charles, thank you. Yes, it is the government, but I also think we need to ask ourselves some critical questions. We need to ask our religious leaders some critical questions, our teachers, our parents, our grandparents in that system that is there. For example, what would be wrong with just asking our grandfathers, for those of us who are alive, or our older uncles, what that system was like in terms of, having those discussions on reproductive health. We did talk about it. This is not something that's coming from the West. So just some of those things that we need to be having regarding this conversation. So carry it on, go on with it on the various platforms that you've got, Twitter, Facebook, SMS, at the bar, at the restaurant, at the salon, at the workplace. Let's have this discussion and let it be solution-oriented as we move forward and we digest the statistics that have been released from that report. Many thanks to Dr. Joachim Osur for joining us on the show this morning. We want to take a short break right here on Sunrise Live. We'll be back with lots more, so please stay with us.